here today to talk about the great work that our team has been doing with so many folks here. We're really excited about it. So we are working on a project under the CAP program, or Continuing Authorities Program. So what is CAP? Maybe Amy can tell you, but probably you've never heard of it. So basically, the Continuing Authorities Program of the Corps is a series of standing authorities. So as long as you fit within these categories, you don't have to go to Congress for specific authorization for a study, nor to construct. So it's actually funded under our Construction General Program, which is great. So this is about getting projects in the ground and the implementation. And the reason that we have these standing authorities is because Congress says, you know what, these are smaller, less complex, less expensive programs, so you don't have to come to us for a permission slip for each one. We're going to give you a sort of general permission slip if you stay within these bounds. And so we like that because we like to be able to get things done. And these are the different programs that we have under CAP. So this is a 206 for aquatic ecosystem restoration. And we can spend $10 million of federal money on it. So it is a cost share program with our partners, our non-federal sponsors. So the study is cost share 50-50, and then the implementation is 65 federal, 35 non-federal. So that ends up, depending on how much you spend on the design and study, between $12 and $15 million of a project. And you know, there are a number of different other authorities that I'm happy to stay after and talk to folks about, or can send me an email. So it's a two-phase process. The first is the study, and then we come up with a final report that has our selected plan that we identify during the study. We do the environmental compliance, and we do the preliminary design enough to feel confident in that our cost estimates are good. And we try to complete the study within 2 years or less, including that preliminary design. And then we can move straight into design and implementation. Once we put in that funding request, we get our implementation money, and then we sign a new agreement for implementation. So I'm gonna sort of speed this up a little because I know we're over. Some key points here are that we can do recreation as part of the CAP 206 also, which is great, especially in a place like Elsinore. The stipulations of that are we can spend 10% of the total project cost on recreation features, and those have to be independently justified. So we have to show that the benefit to the nation in terms of like increased recreation and utilization, increased business for local businesses, things like that, exceeds the cost of those recreation features, but that's great news. And then the operations and maintenance of the project once it's built, that is 100% on our partners. The feds don't like to take over long-term operations and maintenance if they can avoid it. So we pass that off to our local sponsors to kind of care for the project once it's built. And so we do need to tie our restoration to hydrologic regimes and restore native species, so not native. And then we're focused on aquatic restoration, so we're not doing a lot of uplands as part of our jurisdiction. So this is our timeline, and we are working towards that red star, the tentatively selected plan milestone. We completed our federal interest determination. That picture up at the top left is from our kickoff when we signed our feasibility cost sharing agreement. Congressman Calvert was there and has been really supportive of getting this project off the ground. So basically, you know, we have fewer milestones in CAP than we do in our larger study, which is great. A little bit less red tape. We try to get to that decision point earlier, and part of that is, you know, scaling and scoping the analysis to be up to like a more appropriate level for the complexity of the study that we're doing. And since CAP is for less complex projects, we try to speed that up so we have more of that money to spend on the actual construction. And yeah, so once we identify a plan, we release a report for concurrent review, including agency, stakeholder, public review. We'll have a public meeting, and then we'll incorporate the comments and respond to them, finalize it, and get approval. So this, you guys know this better than I do. This is just an overview of the area and some of the problems that we're trying to address. These are the problems and opportunities that we kind of identified for our particular project. Loss and degradation of the aquatic and riparian habitat, loss of floodplain habitats, and the spread of non-native invasive plants and fish, potentially amphibians. And we're really looking at opportunities to restore those ecosystems, educate the community on the importance of the aquatic and riparian habitat, as well as kind of some of these causes of the algal blooms and fish kills, and how homeowners and businesses can help. So there are, other opportunities for engagement that maybe we won't implement as part of this project, but we can talk about and use the project and the outreach that we do as part of the project to kind of reach the community and talk about those things. We want to increase recreational opportunities in ways that are sensitive to the environment, provide connectivity to other trails in the area, and we see an opportunity to use that wastewater treated effluent that the municipal water district provides to help restore habitats and improve water quality in the lake, and linking habitat corridors, improving water quality, et cetera, et cetera. We are going to look at potential use of vegetation plants that are significant to Native American tribes of the area so that we can kind of increase that access to culturally significant species. And then these are our objectives and constraints. We don't want to increase flood risk. We want to consider water availability and droughts and fluctuating lake levels over time so that the project can be adaptable and minimize impacts to recreation. And then our main objectives, are to restore that native and sustainable riparian and wetland habitat, and to increase the recreational and educational opportunities. So we kind of approach this a bunch of different ways, throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what sticks, and then we do our analysis. So we wanted to focus on invasive species removal as a first step, and then where we remove those invasives, replanting of native species, and make sure that there's a mix of drought-tolerant species so that if we have a drought, you don't have a die-off and then the invasives come back in, but you can have some continuity over time. We are also thinking, okay, what's the smallest plan that can get benefits? And we want to be consistent with existing and planned land uses. Our partners have expressed, we want to try to have a low maintenance design cost, something that's sustainable that isn't going to cost a ton of money to manage over time. And of course, we want to maximize benefits to listed, threatened, and endangered species, and maximize those ecosystem benefits. So we came up with a few alternatives, and I'm going to talk you through some of those. One is a wetland restoration alternative. One is a riparian habitat alternative along the San Jacinto River corridor as it comes into Lake Elsinore. And then we also are looking at a tamarisk removal and vernal pool restoration in the back basin behind that levee area. And then some different combinations of those. So this is our wetland ecosystem one. It's right over by the old boat launch, where I think Lakeshore Drive meets East Po, if I'm getting that right. There's a park behind there. So this is where the inflow of the treated effluent comes into the lake. And also right above there is where the flood control channel kind of enters into the lake. And so we see an opportunity to do some wetland restoration there, which would have a number of different benefits. One is it would help filter water from the lake. It can create nursery habitat for fish so that those little fish as they're growing have somewhere to forage and hide and get bigger. So fish often spawn in these areas as well. And we want to connect the urban runoff to the wetland so that it gets cleaned and filtered before it enters the lake as well. Part of why we chose this location is because it's the inflow of the treated water. There's a permanent water supply source, so so that helps with long-term sustainability of the wetland. We are also thinking of maybe putting in a circulator pump. We're going to evaluate that, which would circulate water from the lake into the wetland, which would maximize the filtration and the water quality benefits of the wetland. It would cost more to operate and maintain, obviously, because you have that pump component. But we're going to look at it, and but that would also help during periods where the lake is really low, or when the lake is high and the effluent isn't put into the lake. It could provide water to the wetland further up, even when that water isn't coming in. So we're looking at maybe having a fishing pier, although now after hearing your talk, I'm like, we don't need a pier, we can just get a lawn chair. But also a wildlife viewing station. There has been a lot of urban camping, homeless encampments in this area. We have found that when you have more recreation and more visibility, more eyes, that kind of helps discourage camping. So having wildlife viewing can help with that. And then also bring more recreators in. The wetland species that we're looking at are low shrubby species versus trees that are more conducive to privacy and kind of invite people to put up camp, so to speak. So that's this alternative. And we want to do some information signs, maybe some tables to get fish, I don't know, or picnic. I would love folks' thoughts on that afterwards. So, and then this is our alternative 2, which is a riparian habitat restoration. So the prices that were on this last one, these are very preliminary prices from our federal interest determination. We're doing a more refined one now. And that 2.3 to 2.7 million for this alternative doesn't include the recreation pier or the circulator pump, which were new ideas that we came up with during our study. So, this one is a little bit more expensive, at least in our initial conceptual cost estimate. So 5.4 to 6.4 million. It's a much larger area, so you see going up all the way past Summerhill Drive, and it would be a mix of removing invasive tamarisk. So tamarisk, I didn't know about tamarisk before I started this project, but now I'm learning a lot. It's an invasive tree that has very deep roots that can go as far as 30 feet deep, and they suck up a lot of water. So, and this area has a lot of invasive tamarisk, and so when you count up all the trees, and the bigger ones take even more water, and how deep their roots are, we think that it's actually contributing a lot to some of the water quality problems in the lake, because you have all these trees sucking up water from the water table that's connected to the lake. So if we remove those trees and replace them with native or riparian trees that take less water and provide better habitat for birds and things like that, we might see some nice water quality improvements as well. So moving from reach 1 into reach 2A and 2B, you have a lot more tamarisk invasive there. So that would be a little bit more intensive tamarisk removal and some plantings. And then reach 3, in between that development and, is that a baseball? Diamond Stadium. So that area is right between reach 3 and 4. There's a rock weir that was put in when the levee was put in and the river was reconfigured. Probably to keep the river during high flows from shooting and causing a bunch of erosion on that opposite bank. But what it seems to be doing as well is keeping standing water back there and creating a great environment for tamarisk to grow. So there's like a whole tamarisk forest in reach 3 that we would like to remove and maybe excavate, maybe add a little bit of a meandering channel there. We see a good opportunity for improving recreation trails on both sides of that reach, which is nice too because it's got a lot of people and development around there, so it might get some high use. And we could even connect it to the levee trail on the other side. And so having that connectivity can increase sort of the spans that people can enjoy when they're out getting their exercise. So then we're also thinking of maybe putting a pipe through the rock weir to kind of improve drainage through it so that the water doesn't stand as much. We're going to look into that. And then there's some sediment accretion happening. Do I have a pointer on this thing? Oh, no. Oh, I just have it. off switch, kill switch. So you'll see the little like lip at the bottom or nub of accreted sediment that is also filled in with, you guessed it, tamarisk, and reach 4 on that northern bank. So we want to remove that and excavate it down, maybe spread out that sediment and try to create a different elevation that would maybe be less susceptible to tamarisk regrowth. So yeah, so this is this alternative. I think I covered everything. Okay, and then this is our third alternative, which we got some feedback on the other day that maybe this isn't such a viable alternative. So that's something else I'd love to hear from folks on what you think. But there's a lot of tamarisk growth in this area, and then there's also some vernal pools. And for those of you who don't know, vernal pools are pools that come and go depending on the water availability, but they provide really valuable habitat. And they're in areas that are often developed in California, so there aren't very many vernal pools left in California. So they do provide really important habitat. And the water regime and elevations and sort of like topography under all that tamarisk, we think is already good for vernal pools, so we wouldn't have to move dirt too much, which reduces the price, but we would do some tamarisk removal and plantings in this area. We're thinking that this is probably, a lot of this is privately owned land, so it may be too expensive to acquire that property. We can only spend 25% of the budget for federal dollars on real estate acquisition, so that is this alternative. And we would also do some improved signage, mile markers, recreation enhancements in this alternative. And then we have a combination alternative where we mix and match things and see sort of what is the best buy in terms of habitat. So what am I going to talk about now? The conceptual ecosystem models. So this is going to wake some of you up because it's really exciting.
Good diagram.
Yeah, that's a good diagram. So basically, these are models where we try to understand, like, what are the drivers in the system, what are the things that are harming the ecosystem, how does that affect, like, how these things interconnect, and how can we, like, reverse some of that to restore them. And we simplify them. So there can be many potential conceptual models for an ecosystem. They reflect our personal understanding and viewpoint. They're not objective. And they're not the truth. They're a simplified depiction of reality, and they're not comprehensive. They focus only on the parts that we're sort of focusing on for the relevance because of our objectives of our study. And they're flexible. We can change them as we learn more. So here's my exciting diagram of the wetland conceptual model. I'm not going to go through all of this with you. I really included these. My boss was like, take those out, that's too much. But I was like, no, this is a technical audience, and I feel like it's just a little flavor taste of, you know, what are the ways that we're thinking and how do these systems interrelate. And so the gray are the stressors on the ecosystem, so things like prior land management, you know, like putting in Canyon Lake Dam totally changed the hydrology and how things move. The levee did as well, paving the channels, right? So those change the hydrology and remove habitat. Things like the septic systems and urban runoff also contribute pollutants to the lake, and so those are the things that cause reduced ecosystem function and the low population abundance or biomass. So those are these things in yellow are the things that we want to try to reverse through our project to try to get these performance measures and outcomes in green, which is basically our goal. So this is the wetland one. And then we have the riparian one as well. So they're pretty similar. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is how we're trying to think about this conceptually. And then we are going to also do some numerical modeling and basically try to identify our best buy plan, which is because habitat values, the way the core measures them, we don't measure it in money, we measure it in habitat value, right? So it's like, we don't want to put a dollar figure on it, even though there are lots of ways to quantify like, what ecosystem services habitat provides to society, which like if we were to replace forests, right, which clean our air, it would cost probably trillions of dollars to try to get those same services back to society. So sometimes it's cheaper to just not cut the forest down. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but basically, because we're not looking at a benefit to cost ratio of dollars to dollars in restoration, we still want to find what's the best bang for your buck, what's the best investment of taxpayer dollars to get a good outcome, our best buy, and so this is our process for doing it. We do what's called cost-effective incremental cost analysis, where we basically, so this graph on the top, the outputs are in habitat values and the cost is in dollars. And so for additional expenditure, you want to get more outcome. But when you do your analysis, you don't always get that. So those are the plans that are in gray above that sort of bottom line. The bottom line shows the cost-effective and best buy plans. The ones above it are the ones where you're spending more money, but you're not getting more. So we're not going to build those. So that's kind of our process. You'll see that we get a lot of cost-effective and best buy plans, so then the rest is like a team decision and analysis of like, what do we really care about, what are we trying to get, and that's the recommendation that we put forth and try to get buy-in on from our decision makers. So part of telling that story to identify what do we really care about is looking at all the benefits that our projects can provide, not just to the habitat, but to things like the regional economy, to our communities. We want to see, can we advance equity and environmental justice in our communities? Lake Elsinore is majority non-white. It has a lot of women-owned businesses. Can we serve these historically underserved communities well with our projects as well? Can we enhance the recreation, the aesthetics, the culture, cultural experience that the lake and our communities provide? So, and then we also look at national economic development, you know, are we reducing emergency costs, the recreation ties into that, things like that, regional job growth. So, we have a new policy in the core that we're really excited about, which is called the Comprehensive Benefit Memo. It's really exciting. But basically, we're supposed to look at all of these things equally now, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of telling that story of why we should recommend something versus just sticking within the narrow authority of the plan. So, this is a little bit touching on some of the earlier conversations. So the Corps does do a lot of dredging. We have a lot of experts, international experts. And our Engineer Research and Development Center, or ERDIC, is where a lot of them live. They all have PhDs. They're really quirky and fun. And they know a lot. And so I reached out to some of my ERDIC contacts and was like, who knows the most about dredging for restoration and harmful algal blooms? And they were like, oh, these are the guys you need to talk to. So we met with them, a lot of you were there, and they recommended that we put in a statement of need for the dredging and operation technical services, which is 80 hours of free consulting from them on dredging. So we have put in for that. We're crossing our fingers that we get that allocation. So hopefully they can come out and do a site visit and help us kind of scope out what some future efforts might look like in terms of investigating opportunities to dredge for restoration. We have some other programs after that we could use that to put in, you know, potential future planning assistance to states, things like that. They also recommended that we put in for their aquatic nuisance species research program, which is an existing and funded program looking at harmful algal blooms and technologies and techniques to address them across the nation. You know, when I said that the Corps turns over our project, the one exception is we do have some dams that we build with lakes that are owned and operated by the Army Corps of Engineers throughout the nation. We actually, I think, have more parks for recreation to the public than the National Park Service. And so because of that, we are also dealing with some of the same issues that you are. And so we have gotten our ERDIC big brains to try to help us figure out how to address some of these problems as well. So we're going to try to get Lake Elsinore into that existing research program as like a site that they can come and collect data or analyze the data that you're already collecting and see if there's any lessons learned that we can leverage here. So that's something that I'm working on trying to coordinate. They were optimistic that we would get this because most of the sites are currently located on the East Coast or the Midwest, so it's good to have some West Coast sites as well. And yeah, so where we are in the process, you know, next steps and opportunities for future engagement. The bolded things are the really opportunities for future engagement where we would love to hear from you. I will say that when I'm writing my reports and talk, they like to know, what do the public say, what do agencies say, what do stakeholders say, and the projects where you can say, hey, we got 100 comments and they were all supporting this project and saying, we need this. We support this is important to us, and here's why. That is really helpful for me in telling my story and getting approval and implementation dollars and even increasing kind of the budget priority for getting that implementation dollars. So even if everything you hear is great and you're not like, oh, I'm doing it all wrong, I still want to hear from you. Because our decision makers, you know, they don't want a controversial project that they're going to get blowback on. They want a project that people are really going to like because we don't get to fund all of our projects. They don't all go funded. So that is that. And here's my contact info. I know a lot of people are going to have to run. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I'm happy to answer questions and stick around for a little bit as well. So thank you very much.
I didn't hear anything with reference to dredging an island in the center of the lake. We started about 30 years ago recommending that we dredge an island in the lake so it would be a great recreational place for our people. Not only that, but we have deep water all the way around. And I think that would really try to push that because it's something that everybody gains from that individual.
Yes, thank you. So, what's your name, sir? Jack. Jack. Jack was asking about this alternative, which was something that we did look at during the federal interest determination, which is dredging and constructing aquatic islands using the dredge material. So the conceptual cost range that was developed for that was between 16 and basically $19 million, which exceeds what we can do within the CAP program. So that's not a small project. That doesn't mean it's not a viable or a good project, but we basically said, okay, we can't do that under CAP, so let's not focus too much and spend too much of our dollars on investigating this here since we can't build it. And the more that we spend on investigating it through this program, the less we can spend on things that we can do under CAP. So that's why we set up that meeting with the ERDIC folks and are looking for other avenues to funnel dollars that aren't coming from our study into looking at that as a potential future thing. For larger general investigation studies, you know, the last big study that I got approved was in New York in the Rockaways. It's like a $600 million construction project, so we do really big projects, but they need specific congressional authorization both to study and then they need appropriations or money to do. And then once you have a recommendation, it needs a new specific authority and money to construct as well. So there's just more congressional hurdles. That doesn't mean that they can never happen, but that's something that could be built under a general investigations program if it was determined to have a good, you know, just cost justification through that study. So
I think you would gain a lot more with the island. As I remember, anyway, I think it was about $20 million, but you have 3 spots there. We were talking about one huge island there, which also people could get there by a bridge. But the main thing is that all that water around there is really deep water. You eliminate a lot of problems. You know, fishermen can tell you that. And the recreational lake would probably be the best one in California.
yeah, so what I would recommend is reach out to your local representatives and say that you would like to see a study into doing something like this and see if you can get an authority for that. And, you know, we're happy to talk on the side about specific language that might be useful for trying to get something done and work with you. We're not allowed to lobby Congress ourselves, but you guys are. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much for sticking around, everyone.